In this video, we are going to model this lamp. We'll see how far I take it, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward and only a little bit more advanced than the sword in some cases. Let's go ahead and hide this. So in this case, I have multiple reference images, but none of them are actually going to be, here they are, actual orthographic views, like the sword was. The sword was pretty much flat on and we can model against it. We could bring in this image, but it's up to you guys if you want to try to match the proportions. I'm probably going to be more free-forming it just for the sake of this demonstration, to speed it up a little bit. This also have multiple images in here, so I found an example that had, we also have this view of the back of the lamp. We don't get a view of the inside of the lamp, but I was just looking at my own desk lamp, and so I'm just going to be going off of that. So I just chose a basic shape for a light bulb socket. It's going to be pretty much a cylinder, and then a smart bulb that I'm going to put into it. All the parts that we're not going to see, we don't have to worry actually about modeling. So I'm probably going to be working with this one most of the time. In this case, what I'm going to do is I do want to see it while I'm working in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that two-panel viewport layout, and I'm going to come, let's go ahead and close the outliner. I'll go View, Image Plane, Import Image, and I got mine under here. Let's do all files. Let me find that image. For some reason, it's not loading in. Okay, so I fixed that image problem, so I'll go ahead and click Open. There we go. I'm going to turn off the grid. I'm going to change this weird little color space thing that you guys won't have this issue, but I do. Okay. And like I said, I'm not really going to be modeling against this image over here. I'm just going to be using this image as a reference in my scene. And I'll come over here. We'll turn this so it's only looking through the front camera. One other thing I'm going to do is because once I start dropping in my model, it's going to start blocking my image in that image in this panel. I'm going to go ahead and show. I'm going to turn off polygons for this particular viewport panel. So if I go in here and I drop in an object, it's not going to obscure it. Okay, so I'm going to start with this base. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and choose a larger size for this base instead of just 8 subdivisions. I know that this is going to be pretty wide at certain points, and smoothing out with smooth preview that base curvature is going to look a little bit rough, right? It's not going to have quite enough topology still, and I'm going to see a little bit of some stepping going on around the edges. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to set this to something like 12. I think that's pretty good. All right, I'm going to delete the top and bottom for this. The reason why is because I'm going to have an open hole right here for this part to come out. And on the bottom, I don't really care about what's going on down there. Let's go ahead and move this up as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this pivot point down for my object at the base of it. So it's going to be the very base of this object, and I'm going to push it up onto the floor. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and with my move tool selected, I'm going to go to the tool settings. I'm going to click on edit pivot. It's going to let me change the pivot point without moving the object itself. I'm going to move it down to here. If I really wanted to, I could snap it with snap vertice, snap the points, and drag it down here. You can see it snaps to these vertices. If I wasn't dragging it just in the y-axis and I just clicked on here, it would actually snap to the vertices. But I'm using it in the y-axis, so it's going to snap to the vertices, but only in the y-axis. It's not actually going to move all the way in the z and x also to them. So now I'm done editing my pivot point when I unselect that. And now I'm going to move this up and just put it on the floor. And like I said, I'm going to be eyeballing this a lot. So let's go to edit mode. We're going to go to edge mode. I'll go ahead and scale this out. And we're going to go ahead and have to drop some edge loops in. So I'll drop in an edge loop here. So I'm going to try to match this curvature right here. So this is kind of a broad, wide curvature. Let's come back over here. Control, middle mouse click. I'll drop a holding edge right here. Oops. And I'll drop an edge right here that I'm going to select the select tool and then scale it out to get this shape going. Let's pull this one down. Let's go ahead and drop that snapping. Pull this one down. And let's scale it in a little bit. Okay. I'm going to drop another edge loop right here. So we got this little shelf going on. We have this kind of, it almost kind of goes flat right here, and I might add that in with another edge loop. We have like a flat and then a 90-degree angle going up. Go and scale this out a little bit. And let's try to get that flat too. So I'll pull this in. And I'll just drop another edge loop and I'll just pull this guy right here down a little bit. And let's grab both of these and scale them in. I'm going to scale them in both the X and the Z axis at the same time, because if I scale them in on the Y axis as well, they might actually shrink down vertically into each other. Not super noticeable right now, but in general, if I just want to move these in and I don't want to actually move them vertically from each other, I'll just make sure I'm scaling both the Z and X axis at the same time and not the Y axis. So they stay the same height away from each other. Okay. I might drop this down a little bit flatter. Scale it out. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and let's scale this in a lot smaller. So something like this. We're going to try to get this curvature going here. So I'll drop in Control middle mouse click with the multi-cut tool to drop in this edge loop right here. Scale it in, bring it down. Okay. And before I go much further, just to kind of help me evaluate this, I'm going to select my mesh, go to right click and go to assign new material. I want to choose a blend material. Make this a little bit darker so I can see the reflectivity a little bit better, and we'll go ahead and smooth it out. So I can already see I'm going to need some more holding edges because these 90-degree angles right here and this sharp crease, I should get a sharp crease and a sharp edge right there. So I need some more edges there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select these edges. So I'll select this one first, and let's go ahead and use bevel. So I'll click on bevel. I'll use a lower fraction, and let's just see what that looks like. That looks pretty decent. I probably don't need any more edges at that little crease area right there. But I do want one right here to hold this edge. So I'll grab that, go ahead and add bevel, and I'm going to add another segment. We can maybe decrease, well, maybe we don't need that other segment. Okay. I might decide to add another one later. So it's a fairly sharp crease line right there. Again, this feels like it gets pretty flat, so I'm probably going to need some more edge loops in here to kind of really modify the shape, because all I really am messing with is, or working with here, is this edge loop, this edge loop, and this edge loop. So I'm not getting a whole lot of control. I'll drop in another edge loop here. Control middle mouse click with the multi-cut tool. And I'm just going to come to smooth preview, and I'll just flatten this out a bit. Okay. And I might want to go ahead and add another one. That's looking pretty good. I might scale this one in a little bit, but for the most part, that's looking pretty decent. And we can already see that, I can see that stair stepping a little bit. We're getting some flat edges just because I'm still not quite working with a lot of really very much topology. So I'm going to come into my attribute editor, come to my second tab. I'm going to go down to smooth mesh, and we'll just bring this one for this particular object up to 3. And that should make it look a little bit smoother. Okay. I might add another, so the one thing I don't really like about this is that this needs kind of like an underside to it. This is, in general, this is how I feel about most objects, is I don't want them to suddenly stop existing right at the edge, right? Because it makes this impossibly sharp edge. And if I was to put it in my scene, it wouldn't be really casting shadows correctly or receiving shadows correctly because we have this free hanging edge. So I usually like to do is just grab this and tuck it under a little bit. Let's go to flat shaded mode so we can see what this looks like. Let's scale this down, and I'll just scale it in like this. Doesn't really matter. We're not going to see the bottom of this object, so we're not going to have to finish this down here, which saves a lot of time. But now I have this really good, soft, gooey edge right here, so I'm probably going to need to add an edge loop, holding edge there. So we're just going to go ahead and do bevel. We'll bring this down. Let's just leave it like that, and then we'll add another segment. So this is going to be nice because when it actually sits and interacts with other objects, it's going to kind of have this hanging, falling edge, like it has a bottom to it. We can also see there's a bit of a lip to it, so let's go ahead and try adding that as well. So I'm going to go in here, add another edge loop just on the other side of this, and I'm going to scale this in a bit, move it down. Let's take a look at this in smooth shaded. And so we kind of get a lip there, and I could add more topology to make that a little bit sharper, but I think that's good enough for now. All right, let's come in here. This is almost like a little dish or bowl, so you can see this kind of is pushed in, and it's not just completely flat right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come to my edge mode. I'm gonna extrude this in, and I'm gonna pull it down. And then we're gonna have this object right here overlapping with it or inserted into it. So in general, if I'm gonna have an object that's overlapping this hole, I don't need to figure out or complete this hole, right? Let's go ahead and drop a basic object really quickly. So if it was like completely overlapping, right, I don't need to care about what is actually happening in that whole area, right? Because we're not gonna see it. Just for demonstration purposes, well, we also don't actually have a photograph of this, so we can't really see exactly what's happening here, so I'm making assumptions, but I'm also doing this just for demonstration purposes. So if I actually wanted to have, let's go ahead and drop this guy in, and let's just add a few edge loops, just so it holds the shape a little bit better. So let's say this was going to be that rod that comes up. We'll come back to it in a second. And I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to be modeling it kind of like this, where I want this to feel like there's like a little bit of a gap here, and we can see that hole that it's being inserted into. So what I need is, you can see, just like with the problem I had with the bottom of my model, I have this free hanging edge that kind of breaks the illusion of my model, and it's not going to shade correctly. So I'm going to add some interior to that hole. We'll come back out here, select this, let's get rid of that. Come back to it later. Select this, extrude it down. Okay, so we're just kind of building an interior. Just enough so that this edge right here is going to shade correctly and look nice and believable. But we're not going to go too far or worry so much in it inside, because all that part's definitely going to be obscured at some point by this part of the model right here. Okay, all that's left is this needs a little bit of a harder edge, because when I smooth it out, that's going to become completely gooey. So I'm going to grab both of those edges, so this edge and this edge, and we're going to go ahead and bevel them again. Use a tighter fraction, and let's smooth it out. And that's looking pretty good. I probably need to make this a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to grab both of these, and we're just going to scale them in. Again, I don't want to scale them in all three axes at once, because I want to be shrinking it height-wise. So I'm just going to be scaling them in the Z and X at the same time with this little green plane. There we go. And I might actually move it down a little bit. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much my base part right here. So let's go ahead and move on to this next part. Not very complicated, probably a little bit less complicated than the actual base. So I'm just going to start with the cylinder. And I'm just going to, for consistency's sake, I'll make this one 12 as well. I'll assign it the same material. So just right-clicking, go down to Assign Existing, Blend. And we'll go ahead and, again, we don't need the top or the bottom, because we're not going to actually see the very tops or the very bottom of this, and they're going to be holes. Especially the top part has a hole that has a piece come into it. Okay, so I'm just going to scale this in. Let's go ahead and scale it in the X and Z axis at the same time, and not the Y. Move this down. I'll make this just small enough that it's just sitting right inside the hole. Okay, let's take a look at the scale of this. I want to I'm going to move this pivot point, because what I want to do is I want to scale this up, but I'm also scaling it down this way too. I just kind of want to scale it upwards. I don't want to scale it down as well. So what I could do is I could just scale it on the y-axis and then shift it up if I wanted to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the tool settings and edit my pivot again. Click on that edit pivot point. Move this down lower for this object. Turn off edit pivot. And we'll close the tool settings. And then I'll scale it up. So now we're scaling it from this pivot point right here. You can see I got it slightly off. I probably wanted to put it right on here, but I'm not going to care. I worry about that too much. Okay, so I'm judging this might be a slightly too tall. I think that's actually pretty good. I think if anything, this part right here is too tall. And like I said, I'm not going to spend too terribly much time worrying about this too much. But I want to adjust it when I can. I'll just select these edge loops up here. And let's go back to smooth preview, and we'll just flatten this a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use soft select. So I'll come select my mesh, or my tool, move tool, come in here, go to soft select, turn that on. Play with my fall off radius, so it's just affecting the right part. I'm going to get this all the way up until the flat part. I don't want to get the flat part yet. And we're just going to shrink this down. Oops. Shrink this down. And that's looking a little bit better to me. Let's go ahead and pull that down. All right, so now I'm going to start dropping in some edges. Let's go ahead to get this shape. So I'm going to drop an edge here, 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 here, and here. Okay. So, and again, I'm kind of just eyeballing this for the sake of this demo. Let me double check these tool settings. Okay, those look fine. Okay, I'm going to drop one down here, holding control with the multi-cut tool, left click. I'm going to drop one right around here, a little bit lower, right? So it's not right in the middle, down lower. Drop one higher at this little neck rib area. Drop it right here. And because I want a little bit of like, I want a kind of an edge or an indent here, and an edge and indent on the other side, and then a bulge right there. I'm going to need edges for all three of those. So this is an edge for right here. I'm going to make an edge on the other side of that bulge. And then I want to get an edge right in the center of that bulge. Okay. And then this flares out, so I'll have another holding edge here so I can scale out. So I've been talking a lot about just dropping edges for certain reasons. So let's go take a look at what these edges are doing. Let me go back into my tool settings and turn off my soft select. I still have that on. All right, so we're going to go to edge, and let's go ahead and smooth preview. Let's go ahead and start with this guy. I'm going to scale it out. We're going to have to add more edges to refine this shape in a second. And then I'm going to grab this one as well. Or actually, I think it's this one. I'm going to bulge that one out. So that's a good start, but we need to add more edge loops in here because it's just kind of all blending together because there's just not enough edge loops. So I'll grab this edge loop here, I think, and I want to tighten this curve or this little kind of edge indent area here. So I'm going to grab that, go bevel, bring the fraction down. I'm actually going to use another segment. So let's go ahead and go to segment 2. Just type in 2. Okay, and now I'm going to drop an edge loop on the opposite side. Look at that in smooth preview. Now we can see that bulge shape thing is a little bit more defined. And I can play with the shape a little bit more. Like let's go to smooth preview. Pull these guys down. I want to kind of tighten that shape a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I feel like it kind of rounds and bulges out, and then it kind of has almost like a quicker cliff or overhang right here. So what I do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to drop in another edge loop right beneath this. So I'll hold control and we're going to left click. And let's go select that. And I'm going to just kind of try to reshape this a little bit. And I'm noticing just because of how long and tall this polygon is, or how tall and stretched these polygons are, modifying the shape's a little bit difficult. Right, there's too much changing between my flat shaded or my non-preview smooth mode and my preview smooth mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to add more topology to actually get geometry here to get that shape instead of just relying so much on smooth preview. So I'm going to go ahead and select these edges here. I'm going to go ahead and use my bevel tool again. Set the segments to 2. Let's go ahead and smooth preview that again. I'll scale that out. I'll probably have to scale this one out a little bit just to kind of help with that shape. And I can grab this edge and maybe scale it in or pull it up a little bit. And I want this to kind of flatten out right here and go back to straight. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in another edge loop right here. And we'll just scale this in to get those kind of more flattened or aligned with each other. I'll probably have to scale this one in a little bit. Okay. So I think it's maybe a little too bulgy, so I'm just going to grab that, Scale it in. Scale it in. I might even drop another edge loop right there. Okay, so that's good enough right now for this. I think what I probably would want to do is I'd probably want to bring this down a little bit. I feel like there's a little more of a slope here, like a softer, gentler slope, and then more of a hard fall off down there. And I can do the same thing I did down here where I broke this into more edges for this bulge right here, because I really can't change this curvature or this shape that well. I'm really relying on how Smooth Preview is deciding to smooth this out for me. And it works pretty well. But if I really wanted to, I can come in here and do the same thing I did down there where I do a bevel and set the segments to 2 to try to get like a my own curvature to this. So let's go ahead and pull that out a little bit more. Bring this down. Scale that out a little bit. And this one's going to be gentler. So you can see this is a really quick fall off, like a bigger slope. This one's more of a gentle slope. So we'll pull this one up. Scale it down. We'll go back to Smooth Preview. So maybe something like that. If you're confused by that, don't worry about it too much. For this sake, we don't need to add quite this much topology for this example. So I want to get this kind of flute kind of shape, and then it has like a rounded edge to it. So I'm going to grab this, and we're going to scale it up. Okay. I probably want to grab this and move it a little bit higher. And same thing as I've been running into down here is I'm kind of at the whim when my mesh is a little too low poly and Smooth Preview is really determining the shape for me. I'm kind of left to the whim of how Smooth Preview decides to smooth this mesh out when I press 3 on my keyboard. So I'm going to just select this, and I'm probably going to add another edge loop. Maybe let's go ahead and add one right here. Let's go ahead and actually, this is a great opportunity for me to talk about a cool feature of this multi-cut tool. We're going to open up my tool settings. I'm going to come over to Edge Flow. When you click on Edge Flow, notice with it off, when I add this in, it doesn't change the shape or the curvature of this at all. It just drops it in flat and doesn't try to modify my mesh at all. If I come into Edge Flow and I'm using a value of 0.85, you'll see when I drop that in, it's actually doing a lot in this case. I probably don't want it to do that much. But most of the time when you drop this in, what it'll do is it'll try to match whatever you've wherever you're dropping it, it'll try to match those new vertices that you just added to try to continue and complete that curvature. It doesn't always work, as we just noticed just now when I did this, but it can actually really save you a lot of time when you're working, especially on like a curved surface, and you want to kind of maintain a shape or a curvature or flow. But it's when you're adding these edges in, it's just running into so many problems. Like, you drop in an edge. Let's see, I drop in an edge, it's completely flattening my mesh, and I need to like tweak this curvature just a little bit. All right, so it saves you a little bit of time, but it really depends on your workflow. It's not necessary. So I'm going to drop it in, and let's turn back on that edge flow. And I might use a slightly lower value. Let's try something like 0.4 for now. Okay, a little bit better. Honestly, I do keep it at a 0.85 though, because most of the time that works, but I just need to drop it down for that one. So you can see that was probably a little overkill for just that sake. I could have just dropped that in and scaled it in, but I wanted to kind of reiterate that tool. So I'm just going to add this lip right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this in. Pull this up a little bit. And then I'll extrude it down into the shape, just like I did in the base right here. So extrude it down into that hole. Okay. And we'll go ahead and smooth it out, and it's looking pretty decent. If I need to modify this this shape at all, like maybe I want this to be less of like a sharp lip right there, and I want it to be more of like a rounded curvature, what I can do is I could just add some more edge loops just to kind of help it out. So maybe I'll drop in an edge loop right here, and then I'll scale it out a little bit, maybe move it down. This is just giving me more of like a rounded shape. Okay, well that's good enough for me, I think. Yeah, it is. No, it's not. I need to make this a little bit thicker. I needed to kind of zoom out and go away, look at it from like a far away to kind of get a good sense of what's going on. To feel like that thickness, and it still feels a little thin, but I think this is good enough. I think I just need to keep moving on. All right. So let's go ahead and now move on to this piece. So I'm going to model the neck, but the neck, it's not easy to just model something curved, or there's ways to do it, but it's a little bit more challenging and technical. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to model it straight and then rely on myself or my rigger later on to actually bend it into shape. So I'm going to go ahead and use a new cylinder. Same thing I've done before, right? I'm just going to delete the top and bottom caps. And before I do that, let me go ahead and set that to 12 because I've just been working with 12. Just do that. Delete. Okay. And I'm going to move this down. I'm just going to scale it up just enough that it's kind of covering that gap in that hole. This up. I'm going to assign that blend material so I can see the surfaces a little bit better. And I'm going to drop some edge loops in because if once I start extruding this, let's just extrude this top part. So we'll just give it a little bit of thickness and then extrude down. Right, just like I've been doing on a lot of these other objects, and I only have to do it on the top. Come in here and smooth that out, and you'll see it changes shape a little bit too much. So what I'm going to do is I need just a little bit more topology. So I'll drop, let's turn off that edge flow. Tool settings, control, middle mouse click. So that helps a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and bevel this part right here because it's hard to tell, but it feels like it's a little soft right there. It's not like a really hard edge on the outside. So just gonna select that and go bevel. Okay, and it needs to be a little bit taller. I'll move this down and we'll just grab these vertices and move them up. And I might need to add another edge loop in there. Okay. All right, so this next part's going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to use some little tricky tricks to kind of finish it off. I've modeled this a couple ways actually, just for this demonstration. One thing I'm actually going to do is I don't really like this right here. I want this to be more of a smoother transition. Sorry, that was just bugging me a little bit. It's still bugging me, but that's okay. So I modeled this a couple ways, and just like I've mentioned before in Maya, you can model, you can approach a lot of different tasks you do in Maya, especially modeling, in a number of different ways. And to some degree, there's no wrong answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to model it. What I did before was I took this, I scaled it up to the right size and positioned it, and then what I did was I used a tool called Mesh Tools. Insert edge loop tool. And actually, before I did that, first I cut it in half with the multi-cut tool, and a half and half again. And so then I switched over to the Mesh Tools option. The reason why I wanted to do this tool is I go to the Insert Edge Loop tool, open the tool settings, is you can actually insert multiple edge loops at once up to 50 that are all equal distance. So if I click on here, you can see I can actually drop in multiple edge loops, and they're all equidistant, right? And doing that with the multi-cut tool would be a pain in the butt. But the only problem with this is this method, so I think what I did was I did something like 25, and I dropped like this. And then I selected every other poly loop. But you'll quickly see that this is very, very tedious. And there's also a problem with this afterwards, is the fact that I can't really change the shape very easily of this ribbing. And so there's a couple ways around this, but I don't want to, I feel like it dives into topics that I don't want to cover in this class right now. Like I could use a script to kind of select particular polygons and edge loops to kind of speed up my workflow, but I think just explaining that and getting you guys used to that's going to take even longer. So I just wanted to cover that. That was a method I was using to try to generate this. So I'm just going to show you a different approach I want to take. I'm going to kind of model it on a small scale. Again, I'm coming back down. There's another thing that I'm noticing I don't really like this curvature, and this will happen to me a lot, is I'll be doing something important and then I'll notice something that's just bugging me and I just want to fix it. I just want that to be a little bit thicker. Okay, this is going to have a lot of polygons to it compared to everything else we've done so far. So I'm actually going to use a lower poly cylinder because I'm going to be cutting this up into potentially like 100 pieces or 100 slices. And if the more edge loops I have going this way, right? So in this axis, right? The more it's going to multiply all those hundreds of polygons, right? It's going to add another. If I just increase, let's say I cut this 100 times this way and add a single subdivision axis, that adds another 100 polygons to just this one object. And so it gets a little expensive. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get the general shape of maybe one or two of these little ridge objects. So I'm just going to come in here. So it's going to be pretty easy to do. I'm just going to drop in an edge loop. Let's do it in the middle of this. So I drop in an edge loop. Okay. I'm going to get, I think I'm going to treat those little gaps as a little bit shorter than the outside parts. So I want the outside parts to be taller and the inside part, which is going to be right here, a little bit shorter. So what I do is I could drop in an edge loop on either side like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the bevel tool, because the only problem with this, well, actually, let's do it this way. So I'll hold Control and I'll hold Shift, which is going to give me 10% increments of my edge. So we'll go 10, 20. Let's go for 20. I'll do it on the other side. 10, 20. Okay. And I'm just going to select this edge, select this poly loop, and I'll just extrude them in. And we'll just pull this in like that. And this is a pretty low, like I said, this is a pretty low res image, so I'm kind of have to make a lot of guessing here. And I'm going to go ahead and select this and select this. And actually, you know what? I might delete, let me think about this for a second. I'll definitely delete the top and bottom. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just making a single section of this, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this a number of times. I think maybe like 30, 40 times, and then just stitch them back together. So what I do is I'm going to come here, let's grab these, and I need, definitely these need to be shorter, these parts right here. This to be a little bit shorter too. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this face right here, because I'm just determining if I'm going to repeat this. Let's grab this, and I'm repeating it and duplicating it. I'm going to duplicate it, and I need it to stitch back onto itself. So that's just what I'm doing right here. And let's go ahead and scale this down to a better size. So we're going to get this down here. Move that down. Okay. And I'm going to, and I know there's going to be a part of this shape that I'm not going to be super happy with. Like I'm going to want to change things and it's not going to be perfect. And I wholly encourage you guys, as you're working on your models, I just dropped in some holding edges because I know when I smooth it out, I want it to be a little sharper. When you're working on your models and you try something out, I want to encourage you guys to try it out one way if you think you know how you're going to do it. And then if you find a better way, to go ahead and redo it. It's very common as you're learning, and even if you know what you're doing, to try out one method, find out that it was like not the best method or not the right tool for the current job, and you want to backtrack and just redo it. And there's very common, there's no shame in that. So I definitely encourage you guys to, if it's not working out, try something else. And that's actually what I did multiple times with this, because I tried a bunch of different ways, but they were proving a little too tedious. So what I do is I'm going to select this, I'm going to duplicate it, but with duplicate special. And I have a video on duplicating, so check this out if you want more details. And I'm going to make multiple duplicates, and we're going to do 30. Let's just try 30, see how many that is. And let's set this, all my rotate values I want to be 0, all my scale values I want to be 1, and I'm going to play around with this y value. Let's start with something like 0.2. I'll click apply. Okay, so 0.2 is definitely too much, but 30 seems like a decent amount. I probably need a lot more, so let's just do like 55. And so 0.2 is too much, so let's try 0.1. And so what this is doing is making a new copy and translating it up in 0.1 in the y-axis. Click apply. So 0.1 is not enough, so we'll set that to 0.15. And we're just going to get this so it just barely overlaps. And that's not quite there. I need a little slightly farther. 155. Okay, let's try 0.16. And this might be different on yours, depends on how you scale it. I'm just trying to get this so that the start and end point for this object overlap with each other. Just barely. So let's try something very, very subtle change, 0.59. Okay, that's good enough for me. All right, so let's take a look at this. And I think that neck that's a decent, close enough length to my reference. So now what I'm going to do is I need to select all of these neck pieces because these are all separate pieces right now. I'm going to go ahead and combine them together. We'll go ahead and click on combine. I haven't saved in a while, so I'm going to make sure I save. And we're going to call this one, I'm going to go to my Maya 1 file, and I'm going to go to my assignment 2 lamp. Save as. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is these are all combined together now into one mesh, so I can edit them all together. Problem is they're still separate, right? They're not actually welded together. So with my mesh selected, I'm going to go to Edit Mesh. Let's take a look at this in a second. I'll go Edit Mesh, Merge, and just click Merge button. So what that's going to do is the merge operation is going to grab vertices that are close to each other and weld them together. And this value right here is how close those vertices have to be before they're actually welded together. So 0.01 for my situation is a little too high. So you can see I'm actually losing a lot of detail. Let's go back to here. And now let's go ahead and go mesh. I'll try that again, edit mesh, merge. So you can see I'm losing a lot of detail. So I'm going to use a lower value, so 0.01, I want to do 0.005. Let's try that. And I'm just going to double check because I want to make sure, let's go back to object mode. It's kind of hard to tell, but I want to make sure that the starting and endpoints are actually connected. It looks like it with the, when I go to smooth shaded, it actually curves out those edges, which tells me that they must be connected. I can do a double check where I can just come in here in a vertex mode and then just move it. And it looks like they're actually connected, which is good. So it looks like it worked. From far away, it doesn't look bad, right? Up close, I can tell it's getting a little low poly, and I probably needed more edges or more faces in there, or more holding edges, or I wanted to use a higher subdivision for smooth preview, but I'm not going to be getting that close to this model, and I really don't want to bog down my computer with that extra detail. So come back to this, I want that top where it connects to the neck of my lamp. So I'm going to duplicate this. This little bottom piece are going to be kind of the same piece, but just on opposite sides, this piece and this piece. I just went to edit duplicate. I press Control D. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip it upside down. So before I do that, I want to open up my channel box. What I want to do is I want to be able to scale this in the y-axis. So I'm going to take its y-axis value and put a negative in front of it. And what that does is it just goes ahead and flips it vertically in the y-axis. Let me go ahead and set that how it was in the default, right? So if I want to flip an object, I can just select it in that particular axis and put a negative in front of that scale value for that axis. So I'm flipping the y. Okay. So let me go ahead and set that, and we'll get rid of that translate x value. Put it back, line it up right there. And I'll just move this up to the top. Okay. So we've gotten pretty far now. We've gotten the base, we've gotten this complex looking neck, and now we've got to move on to the head. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the main head, and then we are going to add these kind of vents on the side, ostensibly on the opposite side as well, and we're going to then worry about the back side and then also the actual bulb. So I'm going to start with the cylinder. In this case, because I know I'm going to need enough topology to cut out these holes and then also have a face in between, I'm going to need quite a bit of topology. So in this case, what I'm going to be working with is actually 32. And I've already tried this out. So like I said before, sometimes you have to try things out a couple times to actually, model it multiple times, try with different poly counts to get the actual number that works for you. In my case of how I'm doing, how I was modeling it, 32 worked out best for me. I'll delete these guys. Okay, I'm going to start with just this part right here. We'll just get that more or less sized. I can already tell I might come back down here and I'm going to pull this down a little bit lower. think that neck needs to be shorter. So I'll pull it down, and then we'll just go ahead and select this guy. I'll turn on X-ray so I can see through. And I'm just going to cut off inside here. Just going to shift double click that. Let's not select that. That edge loop right there. And then I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, Detach. Come back to Face Mode. And I'll double click that part. So I just use the Edit Mesh Detach to cut that edge loop all the way through. So these are now two detached pieces of geometry, and I'll just delete that part. I'm trying to be a little quick with it, but I could have hid this piece and not had to do the whole X-ray thing. It probably would have made it a little easier for you guys to watch. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this down, and I'm going to go ahead and assign my blend material so I can get that specular reflection on it, so I can evaluate the surfaces a little bit better. Okay. I want to start a little bit with this back edge, and this is where I'm going to also be including. Let's go ahead and grab this, and I'll see if I can actually. Let's go and find the image plane. So let's go to Outliner, Image Plane. I'm trying to select this, but one second. Okay, my attribute editor needed to be updated somehow. Like I just switched over to Channel Box, switched over to attribute editor, and it fixed it. I'm gonna select my other image. So I'm gonna come into my prop modeling, example 1, and I'm gonna try that detail shot. Okay. Again, I'm gonna have to fix this color thing. So I'm gonna come in here and outputs. Rec 709. Let's try that. There we go. All right, so I can see there's a little bit of a taper going on here, so it gets a little bit thinner, and then it has pretty rounded out edge. And we also have these holes punched into the back as well as along the side. So we're just going to try to get the shape first, and we'll figure out how to do the whole thing in a second. So just like this, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also add an edge loop here, an edge loop here, and an edge loop here. Multi-cut tool. This one I'm going to scale in a little bit, move it back, scale this down, and then I'll just go ahead and extrude this and kind of bring it in like this. So this is another situation where I'm fortunate because I have this kind of spot covered up, so I don't really have to actually fill this in and worry about it too much. But in general, if I didn't have these holes here, I'd probably want to do something a little bit different with this topology. But I think for now, I think it's going to be totally fine. So I'll smooth that out. It needs to be a little bit tighter. So I'm going to grab this edge right here. Let's go ahead and bevel it. Okay, let's smooth that back out. Okay, and it still feels a little too round. So I'm just going to drop another edge loop on that side. If anything, I might need to use Edge Slide to start to pull these edges a little bit closer. So I'll open up that modeling toolkit, come over to my transform constraint, Edge Slide, and then I'll just scale this out. Scale this out. Let's try packing these guys a little bit tighter. And scaling it out, I could also just translate them instead in the x-axis. It's a little bit tighter. This should be pretty flat though, so the only problem is I've got this is now kind of pulled out back. I'll exaggerate it so you guys can see. Let me turn that off like that. Something I'm going to do to fix this is I'm hopefully, or you might have had this covered by now. I can't always guarantee that all the same topics are covered in my classes, so hopefully you guys have it covered. But if you have any edges or vertices that you want this all to be pretty flat in this axes, right? But your problem is that they're all a little wobbly, right? What you can do is you can select all those vertices and you scale them down into a single axis. So you can see if I scale them down to 0 in a single axis, it'll flatten them in that axis. If I want to scale them down this way, you'll see it brings them all flat, or this way, right? So I'm going to use that same principle, and I'm going to flatten them down to this edge right here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, I can select both of them and then scale them in the y-axis. But what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to the thing is I want to keep this one in place and I want to scale this one down to be flat with this edge loop right here. So what I do is I'm going to go to my edit pivot point. Also, there's a hotkey, you can press D, and that's going to turn on and off edit pivot. So I'll turn on edit pivot point, and I will turn on snap to point, and I'll snap it right here. And I'll turn off edit pivot point, and now I'll go ahead and scale it down. So this is going to scale it flat, but it's going to, instead of scaling it flat on itself, it's going to scale flat to this pivot point right here. And so you'll see it's going to scale down into that axis and line up right there. Okay, maybe a little bit more advanced, but definitely really handy. I'm going to click on reset for the pivot point. If your pivot point ever gets locked when you're editing it, you can click reset, and sometimes it'll say pin component pivot, and if you don't like that, like it'll keep when you edit it, it'll keep it for no matter what selection you have, and that gets a little annoying. Anyway, so let's come back to here. Let's go ahead and get these faces in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and maybe pull this edge loop a little bit forward. Oops, let's turn off snap to point. Pull that forward. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to, again, like I'm not worrying too much about matching reference just for this demonstration. I'm going to grab this, this, and this on this side. Or actually, let's do this. And what I could do is I might as well just go ahead and make it symmetrical. I could just mirror it again later. Actually, let's go ahead and mirror it again later just so we can cover mirroring just in case. So I'll just go ahead and extrude. I'm going to do a little bit of offset. I'm just doing this so I get a little bit of an edge loop going around it. And then I'm going to delete that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and let's smooth it out. You'll see it's not really holding its shape very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in an edge loop right around here. I'll have to do it down here as well. I could have done this before I deleted my those faces, and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Let's take a look at what that looks like as I'm doing it. So we'll drop that. And so you can see when I drop that new edge loop in, it gets a little bit tighter there. So let's go here. A little bit tighter, a little bit tighter, a little bit tighter. Okay, I already got that one. And then I could probably do the same thing on the other side to get like that. Okay. So I'm kind of really relying, and I can see there's a bit of an issue here, and that's to do probably with this pole right here. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these edge loops. So it's not, this right here is a good temporary working topology, but it's not great topology in general. I'm getting some pinching, but for the sake of this example, I'm not going to stress about it too much. But let's go ahead and scale these in a little bit. Maybe I'll reduce that pinching. You can see how much that's getting pinched right there. We'll pull that in a little bit. Okay. And hopefully that fixes that a little bit. I'm wondering, it feels like maybe it's because this is starting to curve right here. There's a little bit of a slope right here and it started to curve. And so if I took this and I just kind of flattened it out a little bit, there's something about these edges that I added. I wonder if I have, no, I don't have edge flow on. Yeah, so it should be pretty flat, so I really shouldn't be getting that much distortion there. And so you can see right there, there's a little bit of puckering. A big part of that is just because of these corners right here, and we have a pull. We're going to have a pull here whenever we extrude inwards, and so it's not ideal. One thing you'll also see is I'm relying on just a square being smoothed out. Personally, I don't think that's the most ideal situation. I think it'd be better if you had actually an edge going this way, and then you actually took these and scaled them in this direction to get like a better curvature. Something like that. And that kind of reinforce that shape in a more predictable manner instead of you just relying on smooth preview trying to make your shapes more rounded. But that would have required me increasing my topology even more. Probably need to add like at least 50% more edge loops. So we're just going for the simpler approach. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to go ahead and that pinching is going to really bother me. Because you can notice it's not as, it's still pretty prominent on this side. I don't know, maybe it's just not enough. And what I'm going to do is maybe I'll just grab this. Let's go back to flat or smooth shaded, and I'll just pull this out a little bit. Maybe I'll just try to keep these edges a little bit more spaced out, and maybe that'll help. And this is definitely something you're going to notice when you do hard surface modeling, is that, and this is why we are using this blend material, is you're going to notice where your topology starts to cause pinching and grouping in an unnatural or uncomfortable way. Let's see if we can go ahead and extrude this in and see, or let's try extruding it out just to see what it's going to look like. And let's go ahead and drop in, let's make sure let's give it another division in there. That's actually not too bad, actually. So maybe once you extrude it, it's not as noticeable. Maybe it's just because we have no thickness to it, and it's just a free holding edge right there. So we'll worry about it later. All right, let's keep going. One thing I'm going to do is I'm probably going to scale this. Let's double check this. Might scale this down in this axis a little bit. And the X and Z. I just click on that little green plane. And then I'm also going to shift it forward a bit more. It's a little bit more front heavy. Okay, let's go ahead and extrude out the front bulb, or the dish shape. So I'm going to extrude that out. Go flat shaded mode. If you haven't noticed, I like to kind of like do a lot of my work in flat shaded and then switch over to smooth preview to kind of get a sense of how it's coming along. Okay, I feel like this is probably about 20% longer than the base, this dish. So I'm kind of going from that, like it's about as long as the base and then a little bit longer. Okay, and I'm going to drop in an edge loop. Let's see what edge flow does for me. So I'm going to turn on edge flow for my multi-cut tool. And it's not really doing anything. Wrong direction. So I'll go ahead and drop in an edge loop, and I'll just manually scale it up. Let's go ahead and go to smooth preview so we can see this. One thing I'm definitely going to want is I'm going to want a tighter curvature right there. So I'm going to go ahead and select that edge loop and go bevel. Let's bring this a little bit lower. And I'm probably going to add another segment to it. And I might even, somehow accidentally selecting the image plane even though I can't see it. Let's go to smooth preview and I'll pull this out over a little bit, because it feels like this kind of bulges right here. And we'll get more edge loops in here, so it's going to be a little tighter in a second. All right, so I could do kind of what I was doing down below, where I took that shape, took that edge loop, and then split it into more bevels. I'm just going to do it different this time, so I'm just going to go ahead and drop in more edge loops and just manually adjust the shape. So let's take a look at this. So it feels like it's pretty constant. It's like a soft, gentle curve into a flat. So I'm going to make sure it feels like that as well. Let me pull this way a little bit. We'll scale this one up a little bit. Okay. And something like that. That's looking pretty decent. I come back over here. I want to look at this juncture. I'm going to add another edge loop closer to here, because you can see how much this edge right here, this edge loop right here is changing whenever I switch to smooth and flat shaded. Personally, I just don't like it as much when it does that. I feel like it's harder to control. I'll just drop another edge loop in and we'll just kind of help it match the curvature a bit more. And so that edge loop right there isn't moving quite as much. And let's scale this out. Okay. And I'll move that back a little bit more. I'm getting this like kind of overlap kind of feeling right there. Okay. Alrighty, so now I'm going to, there's a couple ways I can do this. I don't know if, it's hard to tell, but it looks almost like it wraps back on itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude it to give it its thickness, but I want it to kind of, but it also, I need to figure out what's going on with this rim. And before I extrude it, I probably also want to figure out what's going on back here. And I want to get this kind of result because this is going to be extruded in as well, this kind of thickness inside these circles. Let's actually deal with that first before we get that edge going. In this case, I have 8 of these little circles. And I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get 8 because I didn't think ahead to this point in terms of this, making sure this number works with these number of polygons. What I probably want to do at least is let's go ahead and drop in, I'm going to drop in the midpoint of where these circles are going to be. So let's go to flat shaded mode. So they're probably going to be, the midpoints are probably going to be right around here. And these are going to be pretty small circles. So I want to make them pretty small like that. And what I want to do is, this is something that I talked about in the sword video, modeling video. But in case you haven't watched that one yet, I'm going to cover this here. My general rule of thumb for creating holes and extrusions is that 8 is the magic number, and I'll show you what that means. Let's go ahead and first I'm going to go to my polyplane settings and bring this a little bit lower. Let's set that to maybe 5. And then I'm going to turn off my grid. So if I delete this, or I extrude it down into a hole, or extrude it out, when I go into smooth preview, it's going to do a pretty decent job of actually rounding that out, right? And so usually on a really small scale, this isn't a big deal, right? You can just go for a square, use smooth preview, and you're going to get a round circle. If I delete this, you'll see, yeah, that's pretty round, right? In my opinion, though, I think it's more predictable when you're working with a shape that even without smooth preview can be rounded out. So with a square, you can't round it out, right? It's always going to be a quadrilateral, right? Some kind of flat four-sided object. If you work with 8 edges or 8 vertices, right? So let's say we're taking a look at this, right? This face right here. I can bring in the corners and I can actually get a pretty good rounded shape, right? So that looks much better. That looks much more like a rounded shape even without smooth preview. Let me go ahead and delete these guys. Right? And if I really wanted to, what I could do is I could select this. If I want to make it a perfect circle, I can click on the circularize button here, and it's going to make it a perfect circle. So in my opinion, even though in a small scale example, these are going to be almost identical, like that, using 4 polygons or just using a single polygon. Usually when I'm working though, on a model and I'm blocking it out, like let's say I'm going to make an arm for a character. I like to work with 4 polygons, and then I like to circularize it or round out that shape, and then extrude it out. And that gives me already a pretty rounded out shape that I can work from. So I wanted to mention that I usually like to work wherever possible with 4 polygons or 8 sides because that's the magic number for me. But in this case, because of how small those circles are and how dense this topology already is, I'm probably just going to go ahead and let it get away with, actually, no, you know what, I'm going to try with 4. If it was bigger circles, or if I needed a lot more, I probably would have just gone ahead and let them just be squares and just delete the squares and let it be a smoothed out shape like this. But in this case, I'm going to try to just go ahead and I have the topology here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out if I can do 8. So let's see if there's 4 there, 4 there, 4 there, and it's not going to quite work out. Let's try 6 instead. So I'm going to do this. Oh, actually, no, never mind. I'm sorry. I miscounted. I'm definitely going to be able to do 8. So we're going to have 1 at each of these vertical and horizontal axes. So you can imagine there's an axis. Visually, I can see this, but I don't know if you guys can, but there's like a horizontal and vertical axes. And so it's splitting into quadrants. And then I'm going to center circles here, 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 and here. Right? So they're going to be centered on these. So I'm going to go ahead and select 4 squares that go around those cross points. And I'm also noticing it's 2, and then 2 blank, 2, then 2 blank, 2. And that's because I worked with that 32. And this is just lucky for me working out in my favor that these are like equally spaced and I can get 8 out of them. All right, so I got those. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little extrude. Let's go to flat shaded. Hold Control Shift and do a little bit of an offset in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a circularize. So I want to go to, you can do this under Edit Mesh Circularize or click on that Circularize button. I'm just going to take whatever selections you have and make them into little circles. I'm going to give a little bit of spacing because they start to kind of overlap a little bit because of Circularize. Just very natural. What happens sometimes with Circularize, it doesn't respect what's going on around it. And so let me go ahead and make sure I'm selecting the right ones. So I'm just selecting, you can see I'm trying to select, you can see how those vertices actually kind of flipped over each other. And so I'm just going to kind of scale this out so that's no longer an issue. Let's grab that. All right. I'll just scale these in. All right, so you guys can see now there's a nice spacing around it. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. And let's just make sure I'm grabbing the right one. Yeah, okay. And I'll grab that one. And this outer one might be a little tricky because it's getting close to my curve, my outside edge, and that's going to maybe affect the rendering. You can see if I smooth it out, it's going to affect that edge, right? And we'll start to notice it if we move it too much. So let's not move it too much. Okay. And I probably want to drop in another edge loop going in here, just to kind of help hold the shape. All right, so now these are circles. Let's go ahead and delete these. I'll hold tab to do paint selection instead of shift clicking. Oops, tab. Just let me do a little quick. I just hold tab while I'm clicking and holding over those pieces of geometry. Let's delete it, smooth it out, and there you go. I could spend more time scaling these in. Like what I might want to do is I might want to grab these edges for these holes right here. And what I can do is, let's try, I'm going to turn on soft select. And we're just going to try scaling that in. And I don't know if that's actually going to work out too well without grabbing all these faces down here as well, or all these edges. Let's just try it really quickly and see if we can get this going. Okay, let's scale that down. Okay. All right, that's good enough for now. I mean, they're definitely a little bit smaller and a little bit more tightly packed closer to the middle, but I don't want to spend forever editing this into nothing. All right, so we have the base of this thing kind of made. I'm going to return to the slip idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first, let's go back to flat shaded, turn off soft select. Oh, I was doing a hotkey for soft select, so I didn't mention it. So just reminding you guys, soft select right here. You can a hotkey for that is pressing B. So I was turning that on, but I didn't say it out loud, so I apologize. So I'll select that. I'm going to extrude, scale that out a little bit, and then extrude one more time and let it kind of hang back. So I got this kind of curved back lip, and so I'm kind of getting that ready. I know I'm gonna probably modify this a little bit. Like I'm not gonna be happy with the shape because first time I modeled this, I definitely ran into problems with this, but it's gonna give us the topology we need. All right, so with my mesh selected, I'm gonna go ahead and extrude. Click on the extrude button, and I'm gonna give it a negative thickness. Have it extrude into it that way. The only reason why I'm doing that, I could do it positive and not worry about these back faces or whatever. Well, for one, I like to show you guys things that you can fix. But two, I also I don't want to lose the shape I have. If I make it positive thickness, it's kind of losing its shape and silhouette. See? Whereas with negative, it kind of maintains the outer shell, and I'm just giving inside thickness. So I don't really lose my shape quite as much, so I like that. I'm going to give it two divisions, sorry, so that I can get some holding edges in there and inside these little circles. I'm going to go ahead and delete these faces here because this is going to be covered up by that little ring. Delete that. Delete that. And let's see. I think other than that, it's probably okay. I mean, if I really was nitpicky, I'm not going to really need to see past these holes, so I'll definitely keep the inside of these holes, but I might get rid of the inside of this geometry. But I'm not going to really worry about it too much. It's not that much more topology. So I'll go to object mode. I need to flip these faces. So my model's black because I'm actually looking at the backs of polygons, right? You can even see here inside is the front faces of the polygons. So I'm looking at the back of them because I extruded inward. Sometimes this happens too when, like, you see this was an object that we flipped. And you'll see I scaled it in the negative y-axis. If I go in here and I freeze its transformations, as in like apply that transformation, you'll see it actually does the same thing here. And so that sometimes happens when your mesh kind of through the process of modeling turns inside out. And it's a pretty easy fix. All you have to do is go to mesh display and click on reverse. And that's going to flip your polygons to face the opposite direction. So mesh display, reverse. And there we go. I'll grab the head of my lamp and go ahead and let it smooth preview it. Like I said, I might want to adjust the curve of that, but for the sake of making this a shorter tutorial, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And I also could go in and I could delete some of this some of this topology in here. And probably it's a really good idea because on the inside, it really isn't going to be that important because you're not really going to see any of this stuff. I'll probably leave one of those. Hold Control Delete to delete those. And I'm doing Control Delete so it doesn't leave behind any vertices. Oh, but actually, you know what? I can't do that all the way around, right? Because this connects back on the outside in some areas. So I can't delete these guys. I don't want to delete these guys. So I was being a little too hasty. But those other guys look like they're okay. I'll just Control Delete. Okay, so I'll go ahead and let's pull this back a bit. Go back to Smooth Preview. And that's looking pretty good. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and drop in my light bulb. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to grab these guys. I'm gonna go to my outliner. You can see I have all this stuff was created when I created the neck and merged all my pieces together. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up by going Edit, Delete All by Type History. That gets rid of all those empty groups that were created during the modeling process. And I'm gonna take what I have here and I'm gonna go ahead and go to Edit Group. And I'm just going to hide that group by going Edit, or sorry, Show Display. Yeah, sorry, Display, Hide Selection. I'm so used to doing it with a hotkey, so I forget sometimes. Let's turn back on the grid so I have a point of reference now. And I'm going to start the light bulb. And so let's go ahead and load that one in just so you guys can see. All right. Open, and I'm going to go for my light bulb. And I might have to bring this in as a new, so we'll do View, New Image Plane, so Import Image. I deleted it because the scale was wrong. It was scaling it based off of a different image. And I can actually use this one as if I want to get the proportions, because it's pretty flat. I'm going to make a sphere, and I'm going to come over to Attribute Editors. Let's drop this down a little bit so it's not quite as high res. So 14 and 14. Let's bring this up, scale it up. Okay, alrighty. And so let's scale it up a little bit more. So right around here is where it gets cut off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to just go ahead and select this edge loop here. I'm gonna go to Edit Mesh. Sorry, I'm trying to not go too fast and go through my shortcuts. Detach. And we're going to select this bottom part and delete it. Okay. Now I'm going to select this edge loop here, and I'm going to extrude it down. And we're going to scale it down. Now let's go ahead and show those polygons again so we can see that. And I'll turn on View or Shading X-Ray so we can see through the model. So let me go ahead and bring this a little bit lower and scale it down. Instead of doing that, actually, let's go ahead and drop a new edge loop right there. And that'll be our holding edge for right there. And then I'm going to drop in a new edge loop so I can get this multi-cut. And we're just going to drop an edge loop right there. Scale this down, match the curvature. We can scale that back out. My pivot point got kind of weird, so I'm just switch to a different tool and switch back. All right, let's scale this down. Go ahead and scale that like that. Scale that down. Sorry, I'm saying scale. I'm extruding and then scaling. So pull that down. And then what I need to do is I just need to give this a little bit of pop out so that you have this rounded shape going here and a rounded shape going right here. So I'm going to select both of those. And I'm just going to scale them out. Let's look at them in Smooth Preview. All right. And I might go ahead and take this guy and this guy, which are supposed to be sharp edges. I need more edge loops there, so I'm just going to go ahead and maybe split it with bevel. Like that. And that looks pretty decent to me. I really don't want this to be super high res. I mean, I could spend forever making this look fancy, but this is going to be definitely a piece that's really not going to be very well seen. I'm going to put some supporting edges here so I do get a sharp edge right there. And so I'm going to go ahead and select that edge loop there. I'm going to go to bevel and turn off chamfer. And so what that does is it leaves behind my original edge and just drops two edges on the other side of it. Okay. All right, so next what I need to do is, these are two different models, right? So what I need to do is I'm going to detach this again. Actually, no, I'm not going to detach. Yeah, I'm going to detach it. Let's detach it. So I'll select this edge, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, Detach. So now I have two different pieces. I'm going to split them into new objects, or separate objects. So I'm going to click on this button right here, Extract, or you can go to Mesh, Separate. And so now I have two different objects. Let's close the outliner for now. And we'll just go ahead and smooth them back out. So this one, this smart bulb, let's go ahead and show no polygons. And let's go ahead and make sure this image plane, let's go back to attribute editor. Let's make sure its color space is okay. So we'll go to outputs. There we go, it's a little bit higher. So you can see there's a little bit of a shelf there, and this is probably gonna have a little bit of a lip. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to extrude and scale in a little bit so we can get a little bit of that shelf. And I might want to go ahead and grab this and add just a little bit more of an edge loop there, or a little bit more topology there to help hold that shape. So I'll just split it with the bevel tool again. And I'll kind of probably do this. And then actually what I might want to do is I'm going to click on Isolate Selected, and that inside part, I'm going to pull this down. Scale it in a little bit. And then what I could do is I probably need one more edge loop there to kind of keep that a little bit tighter. Okay, I'll unhide select or unisolate selected, and I'll do the same thing up here. So I'll take that top edge, Control E to extrude, scale it in. Okay, let's just scale it in so it kind of more or less intersects the other part. And I'm going to take this part right here, I'm going to bevel, and let's go ahead and give it 2 segments and a slightly lower fraction. Let's try a higher fraction. No, okay. All right, so that's looking pretty decent. All right, and like I said, I'm not really worrying about this part down here because that's going to be screwed into the object. So let's go ahead and delete that. Let's bring back, I actually don't even need to bring back the rest of the object because we can't see the light bulb or the other image plane. So I'm going to go to my outliner, select my hidden group, go to edit or display, show, selection. Let's go ahead and scale these guys together. Actually, before I do that, let's go ahead and create the little socket that it's going to go into as well. In that case, what I might do is I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to go to Display, Hide. Okay. I'm actually just going to go ahead and reuse this. I already got a cylinder shape going on, and there's no reason why I need to make this more complicated than it has to be. So I'll scale that up, and the X and Z axis. Let's go ahead and I'll take this. I want to ungroup it, so I'm going to go edit ungroup. Or actually, let's go to, it's not going to work like that, so we're going to go edit unparent. Don't worry about that right now, but it's just going to take us out of the group. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hide that main lamp again. So I'll go edit or display hide, select it. And let's go ahead and grab these guys and show them again. So we'll go display, show, selection. Let's move them up, scale them down, and I'm going to scale them down until they just pretty much fit right into that. Okay, so I'm just going to reuse that one for my bulb socket. Like I said, it's not going to be very visible or important. I have this little transform node when I separated these two pieces. So I'm going to go to edit, delete all by type history to get rid of that. I'll select this group I hid and go to display, show, selection. I'll select this group and move all these. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and put this cylinder inside that group. I can use the middle mouse click and drag it on top of that group to group it underneath that group. Or I can select this and then control select the group and go edit parent to put it underneath that group. So I can select this group. Now I can move it up and transform the whole thing together. Let's go ahead and I'm hold J to get snap by 15 degrees. Or I can do it in the channel box and just type in 90. We'll scale this down, move that forward. Okay. And scale it up a little bit. Okay. I'll have to move it up. Maybe move it forward. And I would definitely want to spend some time finding some reference just to get a sense of how this is fitting. But without reference, I'm not going to worry about it too much. That's looking decent. All right, all that's left is to get this back piece. So I'm going to go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. We'll bring back that detailed shot of the back. Scale it up. All right, so these little tiny ridges, just like how we did this or even how we did the little circles, you can add topology to get them, but this is going to get really, really, really dense really, really fast. So it's really up to you. I'm going to pretend or assume that on this project, I'm going to handle that in the texturing phase, right? So not everything you're going to want to actually get in the model because it's going to wildly blow up your poly count on a fairly simple, what was fairly simple mesh. So in my case, I'm going to get the general shapes of them, and then these little ridges I would assume I would get in texturing with the displacement and normal map. So don't worry about that right now, but we're going to go ahead and block in those shapes. So I'll go ahead and I'll just keep reusing. No, let's go ahead and do a new one. So I'll go ahead and create a new polygon. And the number I've been working on for a lot of this object is just 12, just a little bit higher than 8. I'll just use J, rotate this 90 degrees, or typing in 90 degrees in the channel box. Coming over here, let's hide that outliner. Okay, and I'm going to scale it down, pull this out. There's probably a way that I could snap this pretty easily. Let's go ahead and I'm going to turn on snap. I'm going to edit my pivot point. Edit pivot, move this back so it's right at the bottom of this object right here. Before I do anything else, let's go ahead and delete both of these sides. It's just like a lot of these other pieces, they're kind of not, I don't need to have that completed hole. Like I don't need to have to close off that hole. Sometimes you do, but in this case we don't, because we don't actually see that completion. And so what I'm going to do is go back to object mode, have that pivot point right there, and I could snap it. If this was a closed hole right here and I had a vertex here, I could snap it right onto that center. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snap it in this direction, and then turn off snapping point. I'm just going to move it so that it's scaled more or less all the way around on those circles, and we can see it pretty easily. Okay, go ahead and scale it down so it's about the right size. And this one's, I apologize, this video's gone on pretty long. I'm going to grab both sides and extrude them in. Scale them in. Ooh. Let's scale them in the y-axis, or in the x and z-axis, not the y-axis. Okay, and then I'll extrude them and then scale them down in the y-axis. And if I wanted to, I could probably just bring them into the same spot, and then just like I did with the neck, go to mesh, or edit mesh, merge, and combine them together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in some edge loops to get this kind of crease in the middle. So I'll drop in an edge loop here. And then I'm going to go ahead and select that edge loop and do a bevel, just to split it into two instead. Okay. I'm going to grab this, and then Control E to extrude it in. And we'll just pull it in like that. I'll give it a single division. So I'll drop that division up to 2 just to put in that holding edge on either side so it gets a tighter curve. We'll look at this. It's looking a little gooey. I probably want it to be a little bit harder edged. So I'll probably put in an edge loop on this side, an edge loop on this side, maybe an edge loop in the middle here, and then an edge loop here and here. And then same thing here and here on either side of that edge to help hold it, and also down here. So that's looking pretty good. I can play with that curvature more, but this is so low res I can't even tell what's going on necessarily. I'm also making sure that this feels like it's kind of, we can kind of get a sense of this shelf. I do not, let me go ahead and assign a blend really quickly. I do not recommend that students, ooh, what's going on with this object? There we go. To have objects penetrate as much as possible because it creates a very unbelievable perfect line where they intersect and it doesn't shade correctly. In this case, I want these pieces, like this would be sitting on top of the outer metal piece. So I'm going to have it moved out a little bit so I do have, it's just kind of almost floating right on top, just a very bare gap. And actually, let's go ahead and come back to this piece. That's something I want to do down here. You can see this has like a bit of a gap here, but these are just penetrating. Let me turn on X-ray. So we'll go to shading, X-ray. You can see it's going right through the mesh. So let's go ahead and grab these vertices. And let's go ahead and grab all of them, move them out first. Go to shading, turn off X-ray, pull that down. And you can see there's kind of a curvature to this cylinder that's going on. So these pieces, or these vertices right here on either side, should be up higher, right, to touch, right? And then these ones down out here are going to be lower, so they're touching just because they're trying to match the shape of this curvature. And before I move that, what I might do is I might turn on soft select so I can kind of get like a nice fall off on this. Let's turn up the fall off radius. So I'll set this to maybe 0.47. Let's try that. So I'll just pull that up. Maybe 0.47 is too high, so I'll set that to maybe 0.25 in my case. I don't want it to grab this vertice right here. We'll pull that up so it's like almost touching. Cool. That's looking decent. But again, I don't want this to just be a perfect hard edge because there's no thickness to it. Let's go back to flat shaded. I'm going to grab these edges and Control E. Let's turn off soft select. Control E to extrude in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this outer edge loop, and to make it hard and not go gooey like that, I'm just going to go ahead and click on bevel, and we'll turn off chamfer. And so it creates two holding supporting edges on either side. So it might be really subtle and we might not even notice it, but there's a bit of a gap here. And then whenever we actually have lighting and shading on this object, there's going to be a bit of a cast shadow there. That'll be nice when we get to that stage. Let's go back to this. Let me go ahead and I should have just made a duplicate already, and I'll do that now. That little ring before I detailed it, so I'd have a piece for the switch and a piece for this little guard. And again, this is getting so low res, I'm kind of working off of very little information, but it's okay because in this case, we're just trying to finish this video and this assignment, and this is starting to take a long time. So we'll go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees, pull this up. pull that out. And yeah, just because I should have went ahead and duplicated this ring piece before I added all that detail so I could just reuse that duplicate for these other pieces. I'll scale this in. It's a little bit on the inside. Let's go ahead and delete. Let me go ahead and turn on X-ray and get that other piece inside. It's an n-gon, so I haven't been mentioning that, but you know, this is an n-gon, like a more than four-sided polygon. So I definitely want to fix them and get rid of them. But so that's why I'm kind of going in and deleting them. In a lot of cases, I don't even need it, so that's also why I'm deleting it. But in this case, that interior face, you know, if I can get rid of n-gons, I should definitely do that. Okay, I'll turn off X-ray mode. This is a little hotbar or under shading. And so I'm going to grab this, duplicate it, and scale it in. So this one's going to be the switch. So I'm going to grab this guy and scale it down maybe a little bit tighter, and then I'll go ahead and extrude it. And so we'll give it a little bit, I'll hold Control-Shift to grow it out a little bit more smoothly. Smooth it out so we can take a look at this. I'm going to add a few divisions to that side. And let's go in here and I'll add a division on the outside and maybe an edge loop on the inside to help hold that shape. Okay, and now we're going to do the switch. So the switch comes out. Let's go ahead and scale it out a bit. Let's add a few edge loops, Control, middle mouse click, Control, middle mouse click, Control, middle mouse click. And like I said before, I'm not going to worry too much actually about this being, you know, having all that topology to get those ridges in, because that's just going to make it too much. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to actually close this off. And so this is an example where I do have a cylinder where I do want a cap on it, finally. But this is an n-gon, like I said before, and that's not going to fly. So we're going to cut it up into quads. So I'm just going to cut across from one side to the opposite, like that. Go up to the next one, opposite, press enter. Let's do down the vertical. Okay, and let's do this way and this way. And then these ones right here are four-sided polygons, so I don't have to go across this way or that way. Okay. Let's assign all three of these guys, or just these two guys. We'll assign existing material blend. When I smooth this one out, I'm not sure how it's going to go, but you can see it's, yeah, I can see here. Because of these are poles, right? So we have standard vertices that have 4 edges connecting them, but these ones have 3. So poles are where we don't have 4 edges connecting a vertice, we have 3 or 5, or sometimes 6. In this case, we have 3, and so that's going to cause like a little bit of a shading error there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select these faces. So hold tab to paint, select this. I'm going to extrude. And then I'm going to go ahead and Control-Shift on the offset and pull this in a bit. So let's pull that in. Okay, and now when I smooth it out, that shading artifact is brought in further on a flat surface instead of on a curved surface. And so that's going to really help us out. And I'm also going to go in here and I'll just go ahead and bevel that a bit. Just add a little bit more topology. And to some degree, it should make it so it's almost unnoticeable, right? What I might want to do is this whole piece right here feels like it has like a slight taper to it. So what I might do is I might grab this with soft select, press B to turn on soft select. And then we're just going to scale this and the Z and X axis in a little bit. Okay. Press smooth. And there we go. So this is pretty good. I could do more work in here. Like I feel like there's like a little cut here where I can add like a little cut into the piece, kind of like I have it out here. But at this point, it's kind of pretty much done. The piece that I'm missing and that I don't really want to worry about, we can worry about it another time because I think we'll have to introduce a completely different technique, is creating the chord. But we're not going to worry about that in this example. So this should be pretty good. What we have to do now is make sure we delete all by type history. Let's get rid of the image plane. Let's go ahead and I can ungroup all of this stuff. So I can just take all of my objects and then middle mouse click and drag them into one group and delete the empty group. And so I'm just going to name these. So this one's going to be base top. So I'm using camel case and no spaces. So camel case is where that second word or each new word has a new a capital letter. This one's going to be called just base. This one's going to be neck top. This one's going to be head. This one's going to be neck. This one's going to be neck bottom. Okay, this is going to be bulb head. This one's going to be bulb base. Bulb base. Okay. Or actually, I guess that one was... Oh, yeah, and this was the bulb socket. This one is the switch ring. We'll call this one the switch ring. We'll call this one switch guard. And this one, last but not least, is switch. The last thing I could do if I really wanted to is, just like I have here, I can assign these different blend materials and then give them a slightly different color, if that helps me read it a little bit better. We're not going to pose it, but what we could do, there's a couple things we could do is we could use a deformer to bend this neck and then position this. We could use a rig and create joints and animate it and rotate it with a more advanced system. So there's a lot of different ways you could pursue it, but we're not going to cover it in this video. So that should be about it for the desk lamp. Very complicated, surprisingly complicated, even though it doesn't look like it. But there's a lot of considerations we have to take into account when we model this.